Shaitan is your enemy. So take him as your enemy. You need a shield to protect yourself from the whispers of Shaitan. You block it this way, you block it that way, you turn around and you block it from all ways. You have a shield. And you know what your shield is? All right, guys, here we are. The last surah of the Quran, Surah An-Nas. Now, in the last episode, we talked about when the surah came down, according to most of the scholars, came down with Surah Falaq. Surah Falaq and Surah An-Nas came together. Now, the last surah, Surah Falaq, we talked about how we take refuge in Allah once, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ, and then you mentioned several things that you're taking refuge in Allah from. مِن شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ وَمِن شَرِّ غَاسِقٍ إِذَا وَقَبَ وَمِن شَرِّ النَّفَّاثَاتِ فِي الْعُقَدِ وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدَ. So you mentioned Allah once, and then you mentioned 3 specific things that you're taking refuge in Allah from. In Surah An-Nas, it's the opposite. We take refuge in Allah 3 times from just one thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts the surah by saying, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. Say, O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I take refuge with the Lord and the Master of mankind. Now, just like we talked about last surah, when the Prophet is being told قُلْ, he's announcing, he's saying out loud that he needs Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so that's humbling ourselves, acknowledging we need Allah, because Allah is a samad, like we talked about. He is the eternal one, the one who takes care of all of our needs. And Allah says, قُلْ, talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do you talk to Allah? You should. Our prayers is when we talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and when we make dua, we talk to Allah. So make sure you talk to Allah throughout your life and throughout your day. Allah says, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. And remember what the word a'udhu means? Anybody remember? Yeah, it means you cling to something so powerful. Like you go to something so powerful that will give you protection. So you're acknowledging your need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. Allah is the Lord of mankind. Then Allah says, مَلِكِ النَّاسِ إِلَهِ النَّاسِ. Allah is the King of all people, and He is the God, the one worthy of worship of all people. So we said Allah 3 times. أعوذ برب الناس, ملك الناس, إله الناس. The Lord of people, the King of people, and now the God of people. Now you know what's interesting, subhanAllah? Rabb means caretaker, someone who takes care of, right? Someone who provides and gives and whatnot. Now you can use that same word to refer to human beings, like your parents are taking care of you. And so you know what's interesting though? Is if you went to your parents for something, for help, and they weren't able to take care of it. Maybe you have to go to the next higher up in command, which maybe is the king of the whole country. You go to the king or the president, and if the king or the president can't take care of it, then who do you go to? Who's above the king? Allah. So similarly, the surah says, I take refuge in the Lord of mankind, the King of mankind, and He is the God of mankind. So each time we see a raise in the level of how we're calling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He has power over all things. And what's the word that keeps being repeated? Does anybody pay attention? Nas. Yes. أعوذ برب الناس, ملك الناس, إله الناس. And you know Nas, it means mankind, it means people. But it comes from the same word in the Arabic language that means to forget. And you know, subhanAllah, we're a forgetful people. But now, look what's interesting, is we find out, after calling upon Allah 3 times, we find out what we're taking Allah as a protector from. Allah says, مِن شَرِّ الْوَسْوَاسِ الْخَنَّاسِ. From the evil of the retreating whisperer. Who is that? What's the evil retreating whisperer? Does anybody know? It's Shaitan. Shaitan, what he tries to do, he tries to make us forget. Just like we're Nas, we come from the same word that means forgetting. We can forget. So Shaitan comes to us and tells us to forget about making our prayers, or forget about what Allah told us in terms of doing good deeds. And so we do something wrong, or we forget to do something right. Now Allah says, مِن شَرِّ الْوَسْوَاسِ الْخَنَّاسِ. From the evil whisperer. So not just the whisperer, but the one who's whispering, Shaitan himself. Now, you know, waswas, what that means is not just waswasa. Waswas in the Arabic language means a whisper, to do bad. Waswas means a lot of whispering. This guy, Shaitan, he's telling us to do bad things all the time. And then Allah says, Al-Khannas, min sharri al-waswas al-Khannas. You know what Khannas is? He's the guy who comes forward and whispers bad things to you. And then he goes back. And then he comes forward and he whispers bad things to you again. Then he comes back. And then he comes forward again. He keeps going back and forth, back and forth. And you know what makes him go back? Is when we ask Allah for protection. So we say, oh Allah, protect me from the whisperer who never leaves me alone. He's always coming at me. He's always attacking me. He's always out to get me. الَّذِي يُوَسْوِسُ فِي صُدُورِ النَّاسِ. You know what shaitan does? He whispers in our chests. What does that mean? What's inside of our chest? Does anybody know? If you put your hand on your left side, you know what? You might feel something. It's beating. Do-do, do-do. Yeah. Can you feel it? You know when the doctor puts a stethoscope on and he puts it here, or if you have a toy stethoscope, you listen to your brother or sister, you can hear your heart. But Allah didn't say that shaitan whispers in our heart. He said, الَّذِي يُوَسْوِسُ فِي صُدُورِ النَّاسِ, in our chest. So our heart, that's the most important thing. If he gets in our heart, we're in trouble. Our heart's like this castle. It's protected. What's it protected by? Allah protects it. And when we make dhikr of Allah, it protects our castle. But Allah says, shaitan, he can't get into our heart. He whispers into our chest. But if we keep our heart protected and strong, we keep our shields and our guards up, then shaitan can't penetrate our heart, except if we let him in. And so we have to make sure we don't let shaitan in. How can we protect ourselves from this enemy that we can't see? Allah gave us this surah, Surah An-Nas. When we recite Surah An-Nas, we're asking Allah to protect us from the evil of shaitan. That's why Allah says in the Quran, whenever shaitan tells you to do bad deed, if you think, oh, I'm just gonna do this or I'm gonna do that, I'm not gonna listen to my mom today, I'm not cleaning the dishes, I'm not gonna clean my room, I'm not doing my homework. Remember, that's shaitan whispering to you. Don't let him into your heart. You have to stay strong. And remember Allah, ask Allah, Allah, a'udhu bika mina shaitanir rajim. A'udhu billah. You say, oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from the shaitan. And Allah says, Allah will protect you. And then Allah ends the surah. الَّذِي يُوَسْوِسُ فِي صُدُورِ النَّاسِ. Shaitan whispers into our chests. Then he says, مِنَ الْجِنَّةِ وَالنَّاسِ. From mankind, from jinn and mankind. And what that means is, you know, sometimes if shaitan tries to get to us and we're not listening to his whispers, what he does is he talks to someone else. He whispers to someone else, a human. And that human comes to us and says, hey, why don't we go on social media when your mom said you can't do it? Why don't we sneak out and go do something bad when your parents said you can't do that? Or why don't we skip the prayer and play the video games because we'll pray later. So sometimes human beings tell us to do bad deeds. And they can be acting on behalf of shaitan and they don't know it. So we have to be careful. How can we fight shaitan? We make dhikr of Allah. We recite Surah An-Nas. And another important tool to fight him is to learn, to gain knowledge. Remember the first revelation, Iqra? Because if you know about your religion and the more knowledge you have, the more you can fight shaitan off. The more you'll be aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.